back to the Shreya Wellness Podcast. I'm Ashley Hendrickson, and I'm here today with my good friend, Miss Erin Kassner.
Right.
I'm really excited to introduce you guys to Erin today. I would say she and I are like sisters from another mister. We met when I was in my role at Designs for Health, which she still is in as a functional medicine consultant and health educator. We spent a couple of years working really closely together and realized that we had a lot of similar symptoms and challenges in terms of our healing journeys, but our triggers seem to be a little bit different. So it's important, I think, to share these kinds of stories with you guys so that you can start to dig around a little bit and figure out what might be going on with you and maybe what's at the root of your chronic illness and a lot of the symptoms you're experiencing. So I'm going to let her just kind of take over and tell her story, and hope it's something that you guys find interesting and helpful.
Yeah. Hi, Ashley. Thanks for having me on.
Sure.
So I'm here to talk about breast implant illness. It's not something that I would have ever thought that I would have, nor associate with my symptoms. It's really hard to actually correlate the symptoms because they're so similar to a lot of other things that could be going on. But time does tell, and it really has been beneficial for me to get my breast implants removed. So I'll kind of start with my story, and hopefully it will help just one person. That's kind of my goal, is just to help one person, and if I can help many, so be it. So it started about, I would say 4 years ago or so, when my son was about one. It was a really stressful time having two small kids, as you probably know.
Sure.
And I really chalked it up to just being having stress with kids, because you know how society makes you feel like as a mom you should be stressed, and some things like just go along with having kids, right? So
Right. Not sleeping, all the
exactly,
things, right?
exactly. So my son was one, and so he's a boy. It just was difficult. So I actually started feeling very, very fatigued. To the point where, as soon as I got home from work, I would definitely go to the gym, but I would like muscle through it. And then I would literally count the clock down until I could get into bed. And this is definitely not like me. And as Ashley, as you know me, I try to be very energetic, and I have, a lot of energy, and I never sit down. Right. So something was definitely off. So I would start getting like dizzy spells. Like I told my husband, like, we're going to finally figure out what's wrong with me when I'm in the hospital, because then I'm going to faint and they'll have to do all these tests to figure out what's wrong with me. So eventually, a couple months after I started feeling bad, I went to a functional medicine doctor, and she did, not a doctor, but nurse practitioner, but she did a ton of tests. Like, I think I'm probably still paying that blood bill off, right? So nothing really came up. I mean, she tested anything and everything. So then I'm like, okay, this is not good enough. So I bounced around to, probably 3 other functional medicine practitioners within that time period. And I really couldn't find anything. I spent thousands of dollars on organic acid tests, stool tests. I mean, you name the test, I did it. And nothing really had pointed out really anything. And so finally, when I started working at Designs for Health, I was able to implement great supplements to help me feel better, but I knew something was still not right.
Yeah. And let's talk about that for a second, because I think I want to dig into the symptoms a little bit, because our symptoms were so similar and our triggers were very different. And I do think it's important to point out that it was after your second pregnancy. And that's when I see a lot of this kind of stuff happening, because there's been so much additional stress on the body. Mm-hmm. But what were some of the major symptoms you were experiencing?
Oh, geez, you name it, I had it. And it always felt like I was playing whack-a-mole. Like, okay, right. I've supplemented out of this. Now something else is happening. So my main one was just gut issues. I mean, I would it's what you consider IBS, which we both know it's a BS.
Total BS. Right.
That's what most people would associate it with.
Sure.
And then just fatigue was just off the charts. And then like my body was so weird. My body just felt like it was tingling. Like I can't describe it, but it was just the weirdest feeling ever. And I would get that like when I would get tired, my body would start tingling. Um, I would have joint pains, like my arms would like ache, like start here, and I could like literally feel it like going like to my elbow aching and then my hand aching and then back up. It was just like the weirdest feeling ever. And then I found out I did have marcons in my nose, which is associated with mold toxicity, which I'll get into here in a second. But like when I would move my eyes, it just would hurt.
Yeah.
I had headaches. I felt dizzy all the time. I had bladder issues, like almost like interstitial cystitis, but that because I couldn't figure out the triggers.
For those of you who don't know what cystitis is, that is inflammation of the bladder. And unfortunately, the symptoms feel like you're peeing up shards of glass for most people. So it's extremely uncomfortable. It's related to a lot of different inflammatory conditions. And it's just one of the ways that toxicities can show up in our bodies.
Yeah. Another thing I lost a lot of weight. So at one point, like I was at my heaviest before, like after kids, I weighed like 120 and I think I was down to like 105 pounds and I'm 5'3". So, you wouldn't think that that's bad, but me as a person who I want to like look healthy and put muscle on, it was really awful for me. A lot of people are like, oh, boo, you can't put weight on.
Right. That was the only symptom of ours that was not identical because mine was I couldn't keep weight off. So my inflammation showed up in being puffy and yours showed up in probably malabsorption of nutrients, I would guess. Right.
Poor gut assimilation and all that good stuff. And probably H. pylori probably didn't help with that either.
Yeah.
So, I finally, once I started with Designs for Health, I got with a new nurse practitioner who I love, and I credit a lot of this to. And we did a Candida protocol because that was actually one of my other symptoms too, is that, with Candida, there's all sorts of different symptoms that you can have. And so, I did a GI map test again, and finally Candida showed up high, which I had done, I think 2 or 3 previous ones, and it had never shown up, even though I still had the same symptoms. But you and I both know that Candida is tricky to find, right?
Yeah.
So we decided to do a Candida protocol, and I did the diet, which is the IFM based one, which you can't have carrots or apples or anything. It's just
very restrictive,
very restricted. And it sucks to do. So I did that for 3 months, and then I did the supplement regime, and I actually was feeling better on that. And like my symptoms had subsided. And so, as soon as I got off of that, I remember it was on spring break of 2021, and I felt like crap. Like whole GI symptoms came back, Candida symptoms came back. And from what I had learned at Designs for Health and talking with other practitioners, that Candida needs a reason to proliferate. Like there's obviously some that's going to be in your gut naturally.
So let's hold on for 1 second, just to make sure everybody understands what we're talking about. So you mentioned GI map. And for those of you who are not familiar with what we're talking about, that's a comprehensive stool analysis. And what we're doing when we look at the stool is looking at the health of the complete GI system. So we're looking at health of the stomach. H. pylori is a bacteria that is in the stomach and can be contributing to ulcers and stomach acid imbalance. We look at intestinal health and small intestine, looking for leaky gut and inflammation, sensitivities to gluten, any pathogens that may be there, as well as parasites, and what the balance of the beneficial bacteria are as well, which is typically a problem when you're dealing with these GI issues. Candida is very common. That's a yeast that we should see in a healthy gut microbiome, but it becomes problematic when it is overgrown or out of balance in comparison with the good guys, I like to call them. So just to make sure everybody is clear on what we're talking about. So you did the Candida protocol, which requires a really restrictive diet and a lot of supplementation. Yes. You really can't mess around with it because what we're doing on that kind of protocol is removing a lot of sugars, even from things like fruits, because that's what feeds the Candida. So you're eating a lot of like greens, maybe berries,
Meat.
lean meats, and healthy fats.
Right. Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
No coffee.
Yeah. So that could be a reason why I lost all weight, because I just got
Couldn't
sick
eat
of eating
anything.
the same thing, right?
Right.
So yeah, so after that, like, I knew it wasn't my diet, because you and I both we eat very restrictive and really good,
Yep.
So I had to go to another practitioner, but I wanted to do a mold toxicity test, because I had heard that mold attracts mold, which candida is another type of mold, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think the whole time, the 3 years that I was doing all the other tests, I was scared to do a mold test, because I was afraid to see the outcome, right? Because
Sure.
um, if anybody's ever gone down that road, it's a huge rabbit hole, and it could be a money pit too, because you then have to figure out, where it's coming from and all that. So finally, I just decided to do it. And so I went to another functional medicine doctor, did it. I did it was a Great Plains mycotoxins test. And I'm not sure how many markers are on it, but I think probably like 10 or 11. It's just the substrates of the different types of mold in your body. And so I think 5 of the markers were off the charts. So found out what my issue was, right? So I thought, I was like, okay, now this is mold toxicity. So that's what I have to deal with. So on one of the markers, the gliotoxin is a metabolite of, I can't remember what type of mold, but on the high end of the test was 200. Okay. Mine was at 5,037. So
Holy
that tells
cow.
how high it was. So
Yeah.
my functional medicine doctor was like, yeah, I think this is probably why you're experiencing these symptoms.
And mold is a neurotoxin, which would explain a lot of the tingling and like the traveling pain. I think a lot of times that gets kind of lumped into fibromyalgia, and we just kind of
Oh, yeah.
like brush it off as, well, you have fibro, we don't know how to deal with this. But just important for you all to understand that these symptoms are systemic and they are transient and they're hard to pin down. So it's important to start working with someone who knows the ropes, has been through it, and can help you kind of navigate which lab tests do you need to start with and where do we need to look based on your history.
Yeah.
But
And
a
another,
lot of what you're experiencing is neurotoxicity,
yeah. And
right?
another thing that it can do is it lowers your MSH, which somehow has like a response for your hormones. And so another reason why I thought might have mold toxicity is because I had all 3, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, were low, which is very uncommon for somebody. I was 40 at the time, so
Mm-hmm.
very uncommon to have that. So that's another reason why I decided, okay, I think I probably need to look into this. So my practitioner then put me on some supplements to help with mold toxicity. So things like liposomal glutathione, just to help push your detox pathways, so to help detox that mold out, and then some specific type of binders that would bind to that mold. And then I also was taking oil of oregano, which I don't know what it is, but that really helped me. And I did research actually to find out that with specific strains of mold, it can actually help. So I'm thinking that's the
Yeah, it's
correlation there.
antimicrobial, so it makes sense. It
Right?
goes in there and kills it.
Mm-hmm.
And the glutathione is the body's master antioxidant, which, if you're mold toxic, your detox pathways are compromised and you're probably not making enough of your own. So, those are great supplements. I'm glad you brought them up because I wanted to talk to you about some of your favorite detox products.
Yeah, so those were the primary ones. I mean, we'd be on here for hours if we went through all the
Right.
products that I've tried, and probably same thing with you, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it's hard because we could get them for free. So, anyways, so from there, I knew I needed to get my house tested for mold, because I didn't want it to be affecting my kids or my husband. So that within itself was not cheap either.
No. Who
Had
did you use for that?
I think Mold Pro.
Mold Pros?
Yeah.
Yeah, us
So
too.
yeah, so they had came in and they tested each level of my house. That they tested the air quality and that versus that of which is outside. And long story short, they didn't find anything. And they also looked at my mold test to correlate, if any of the mold that, I mean, everybody has mold. There's mold everywhere, right? But the strains of mold that they found in our house versus mine that were over proliferating, and they didn't really match up. So, like, okay, great. So the next step, like I belong to a breast implant illness group on Facebook with over 160,000 women in it. And so I had seen women mention and even seen tons of pictures of women who have had their saline implants removed with chunks of mold in it. And so I had saline implants. And so I'm like, maybe this is the cause, because, I've tested my house, like where else could this, I mean, there's a lot, that's a lot to be.
It was a very high level.
Yes.
Right.
So like, it has to be something I'm eating or coming in contact with on a daily basis to be that high. So I decided to make a consultation with Dr. Christine Kelly, who is the kind of in Indianapolis. She's the person who is an expert at implant removal or explanting, right? So I made a consult with her. I think it was in September. So maybe about a year ago, even I talked with her. And I finally made the decision. She's a great, great physician, and she takes the time to listen. And based upon what her findings were and what she's seen with other patients, I decided to go ahead and schedule my explant. So during that time, I was continuing to do, just the liposomal glutathione and the binders for mold, but it didn't really feel great, right? And up until, I mean, I would go in waves where I'd feel fine, and then like I'd hit a wall, and then I wouldn't feel good. So kind of probably like you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then in December of 2021, I decided to have surgery, and that's when I got my implants removed. So surgery wasn't actually that bad, and I really accredit it to the great supplement routine that I had, and it wasn't awful. You just have to you typically have to wear drains whenever you have surgery. So I had drains in for 6 days, and that kind of stinks because I have no boobs, right? And so my skin would just like rub up against the drains, and it just was not comfortable. But once they were out, it was like, I'm ready to go. So even like within that first week of getting my implants out, I could tell I was feeling better. My energy was better. And I think even just like mentally, I was so much like more mentally strong that like I did this, and I can't believe that I did this. Like I did this for my health. And like, it's not an easy thing to do, right?
No, I would imagine not.
Because like mentally as women, we're all supposed to be looked at as like boobs are our status symbol and our sex symbol. And for me to go from having my implants for 16 years and then to how they look now, it's hard. It was really hard, and it's a hard thing to overcome. But
I want to talk about that a little bit, because I think body image is such an important thing for us to address, right? And I'm sure the mental, emotional journey that you went through and deciding to get them, how you felt after you had them, and then the mental, emotional decisions that you had to make and what you experienced and deciding to, and then having them removed and moving past all of that has got to be really heavy. And I feel like so many of us are so hard on ourselves, right? Like we get bombarded by society on how we're supposed to look and what we're supposed to be like or act like, or all of those things, right? And like for you, it was your boobs weren't big enough. For me, I was always too fat, right? And so the way that we talk to ourselves too is so important in this healing process, right?
Yeah, it is. It really is.
And I think body positivity is huge, but we also need to have respect for our bodies, and that's totally different, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's just, like when I got my implants initially, I was a personal trainer, and, being in that industry, it's just, it was hard not, to try to be in shape, but to still not have any boobs.
To
And
not
I'm like,
look
oh,
perfect.
and this was my
Hmm.
answer, right? This was my answer to having it all, right?
Right.
And I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I liked having them, right? Just comparatively. But and back when I was 23 years old, I really wouldn't care. Like if somebody told me like, hey, you might have some issues when you get older. I'm like, man, I'll deal with that later, right? But now I know that it's made a huge impact on my health, and I don't even know, right? You don't even know what it has done or what it will do down the road. So,
Right. And you did develop autoimmunity, is that right? Do I remember
yeah,
that
so
right?
I
Yeah.
do have Hashimoto's. So,
Me
um,
too.
yeah.
However, our triggers are different.
Right. Well, see, like I think I have a good comparison because I do have an identical twin sister, and
Hmm.
she didn't have implants, and so she does still have Hashimoto's. So I don't necessarily know that it was the trigger for it, but it was around that time, and also like yeah, it runs in my family, but there actually is there's a syndrome. It's called Asia, so I can give you information if you want to put it up. But actually, any type of implantable devices increases your chances of having an autoimmune disease. So
Hmm.
not necessarily breast implants, but also like knee implants, hip replacements.
Mine
Um,
was a copper IUD.
Yep, I mean teeth
Yeah.
implants. So just because you just think about it, your body doesn't like that it's
It's a
there, and
foreign object.
it's doing whatever it can to get it out.
And a
So
lot of them are toxic. And we
yeah,
don't think about it. The plastics and the metals, it's not
yeah,
good, right?
I know. So to continue on my story, after I had my explant in January, I took it really slow. I let my body kind of do what it needed to do on its own afterwards because I didn't want to push it. Because before I had my implants removed, I did push it and it made me feel kind of like pushed me back. And so
Hmm.
I wanted to kind of go move forward and let my body do what it needed to do for a little bit. So I waited about 6 months or so. I went back to my functional medicine doctor and I was like, I want to go check my mold because I was feeling a lot better and I didn't have like the tingles and all that stuff that I used to. So at the end of June this year, I actually had another Great Plains mycotoxins test done. So the same exact one. And a lot of times on these mold tests, what we do is you have them provoked. So you provoke the
Hmm.
mold out with liposomal glutathione. And so I had already been taking it. So both times before I did the exact same way. I used the liposomal glutathione the night before. And then in the morning, basically it's a urine collection. So I did the exact same way. So got the test back um, on the way home from, we went to Wisconsin for, I don't know, my daughter's birthday or whatever. And I started crying because it was all gone. The mold
Wow.
was gone. So
All
something,
gone.
yeah. And
That's amazing.
the only thing that I changed was getting my implants removed. So, like, whenever I talked with my functional medicine doctor, he's like, there's no way that it's gone. I've never seen it be gone that quick. And I'm like, if you think about it, if you remove the source, I'm not
Right.
saying that my implants had mold in there because I never was able to find a company to test the inside liquid, but maybe it did. Right.
Right.
So, and then also what my like plastic surgeon and also my functional medicine doctor agreed that something was causing my body to not be able to detox. So whenever I was doing that, maybe, it was impairing my detox pathways with inflammation.
Hmm.
So, yeah, it's crazy. I'm so happy.
Yeah, it's a great story and so important to tell. I will say too, on those mold tests, like my experience, because I know my genetics, my detox pathways are compromised. When I
Mhm.
first tested for mold unprovoked, it all came back zeros. And the doctor I was working with at the time was like, see, you're fine, no mold. But nothing was getting better and it didn't really make sense. And I couldn't get rid of this candida. And then I went and did actually IV infusions with glutathione push before the collection of the second test. And I
Mhm.
was off the charts. So
Crazy.
sometimes you do need, especially if you're feeling like maybe you're toxic, to do that glutathione prior to the testing. If this is something that you guys would like more information on, please send a message, drop a note, reach out. We have lots of resources. Myself and my coaching team can help you get access to these tests if it's something that you think you need to address. I'm sure Erin has some great resources if you guys are experiencing what you think may be breast implant illness. It's something to really consider looking at. I've seen so many cases of women with chronic systemic types of conditions that they cannot figure out. And it oftentimes leads back to the implants. Copper IUD is another one. That is a toxic substance. And if you've seen a copper IUD once it's removed after about 10 years, all the copper is almost gone off of that plastic. And copper is a major toxin. So heavy metals may be something to look at if you are someone who's experiencing a lot of these weird symptoms that you can't understand, just general fatigue, GI symptoms, aches and pains. I can definitely relate to everything you've been through. I'm sorry that we experienced it, but I'm glad that we figured out what's going on so that we can really start to educate and empower other women and men, but typically they're not dealing with these types of implant issues, to really start to get to the bottom of what's going on and take control of their health. You know, not one practitioner is going to have all the answers for you necessarily. So it's important to get a team together and to have some support resources. So you have your own Facebook page, right, to support women in the Indiana area?
Yeah, so we have, it's called BII Healing and Support Indianapolis. So really anybody can join. If you just Google, or not Google it, but like look on Facebook for it. Or if you want to contact me and I can invite you in. So pretty much, so that Dr. Christine Kelly that did my explant, her and I, and then another naturopath from Indianapolis who also had her implants removed because of my story, thankfully. We put this group together because, you know, there's that huge group with like over 160,000 women in it, but nothing really local here to Indianapolis. And we thought it would be great just because like it's such a hard decision. And you want to relate to people that have gone through all of this. So we created a group just to kind of help with, you know, any questions that they may have or pre and post surgery. Like right now we're doing a like detox group that we're going to start on November 7th, because that's one thing that women really want after they've had their implants removed, is like, how do you safely detox from it? So so we're doing that group starting on the 7th. But yeah, so we started a group. There's about 70 women in it right now. A lot of them are some of the other women who have either been through the explant process with Dr. Kelly or getting ready to. So, but I mean, there's been other women who have gone. I think there was a lady who went to Puerto Rico and had hers done. So
yeah, lots of options.
Yeah. So really cool.
I think too, in women's health, just one last thing that I want to mention around mold toxicity is a lot of times when we see women who are having a hard time conceiving or having multiple miscarriages, oftentimes mold toxicity can be a big factor in why their bodies are rejecting babies. I've seen one client specifically, she must have had 5 or 6 miscarriages. Unfortunately, she was exposed to mold at home and at work. But once that was identified and the detox process was successful, she was able to conceive and carry full-term healthy baby. So there's lots of stuff that this can impact, and it's not out of the question that a lot of us have been exposed. Mold can be something we were exposed to as children, and if you do have compromised detox pathways, that's just sitting around. Your body's not able to really tag it as a toxin and get it out. So you know, think about the environments you've been exposed to. If it's not a breast implant for you, maybe you had, flooded basements when you were a kid, or you lived in a basement in college, or you live in an older home built, with wood as the foundation in the Midwest where it gets wet a lot. So there's lots of ways that this can show up, and it's important for you guys to start to understand how to ask questions and look around to try to get to the bottom of why you're feeling the way you are.
Yeah, there's also a gene mutation too, that I think about 25% of the population has, that makes you not as susceptible to be able to detox mold specifically.
Yeah. And we can look at genetics too. So if that's something that you guys are interested in or would like more information on, feel free to reach out at info@shreawellness.com. Or you can check out the website bwcenters.com for my health coaching information. Erin, thank you so much for being here. I'm so happy to be able to share your story with everyone. And hopefully, like I said, this was informative and inspirational for a lot of people out there who are suffering. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. Happy to have you all back here, and we'll see you soon. Have a good day.
Bye.